welcome to A Voice and Beyond. Tyran Parke, how are you?
Oh, I'm good. I'm good. I'm so pleased this has happened because we've tried a few times and life is busy and crazy, but I was determined to do it before the end of the year. So I'm so happy we're finally connecting.
And I'm so happy too. We have been both trying to get together at the same time, and it's been hard. You're a very busy man, and we're going to talk about that as well. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of an intro, then I'm going to get into some of that stuff.
Oh, you
So
sound like my mother or something. We're going to have a talk. We're going to sit down and have a talk about this, Tyron.
you and I need to have a chat now.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So, Tyron, you're an award winning singer, actor, director, and recording artist. You're currently the head of music theatre at the Victorian College of the Arts, otherwise known as VCA, the executive producer of the Australian Musical Theatre Festival, and the artistic director of Clovelly Fox Theatre Company. Now, busy, talk about busy. Since graduating from WAAPA in 1999, you've performed, written, workshopped, directed, taught, and creatively consulted all over Australia and New Zealand. You've played some of the truly great roles written for music theatre, and all of these have received stellar reviews. So you have a huge, busy career. You continue to have such a diverse career. And just starting with that, how important is it to be diverse and to be able to fit into all these different roles, especially in the performing arts and music theatre?
Yeah. Look, it's really interesting because when you talk about those things, they don't always feel like it doesn't feel like I carry all of those things with me. It feels like versions of myself. Does that make sense? Like when
Yes.
you talk about, like being a performer, I guess I do compartmentalize a little bit
Mhm.
my life and I mean, this time last year I was casting director for Hairspray, the production that's happening around Australia, and I think that absorbed me, and then that's done. I think the question about diversifying, people used to talk about it when I was a student. They used to go, it's really good to diversify, and I thought, well, I won't need that because I'm going to be Hugh Jackman, so whatever. We all thought we were going to be Hugh Jackman. um, but as you get older, it's not just important so that you can maintain an income, which is important, and keep connected to the industry. It's just damn interesting.
Yes.
Like it's just really interesting, and I find that more and more as I get. I think I've always been uh, obsessed by the theatre, and so I'll be in rehearsals and I would be going, "What does that person do over there? So what is a flyman? Why do we need a flyman? Where are they?" And I'd be the one sitting backstage. The first show that I did professionally was The Sound of Music with Lisa McCune and
Oh,
Bert
wow.
Newton.
Yes.
Yeah, all those wonderful people. Um, and I never left backstage, and I was barely on because that show's all about kids and nuns, and I played Rolf. But so I wasn't on very often, but I would be backstage the whole time watching the stage manager call the show and understand the relationship with that. So, for me, it's part of telling stories is understanding the team sport that is
Mhm.
theatre and is, creating theatre. And so it was always a natural progression to go, how does this written, how do you direct, where's that person coming from? And so in a way, while that is a wonderful way to kind of maintain a career, it's also just my life's passion, which is how do we
Mhm.
tell stories in a scenario that is a team sport.
Mhm. I was going to ask you, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, is are you curious by nature
Oh
as
yeah.
well? Or are you just driven? Are you a workaholic? Are you, uh,
No. I
no?
mean, no, look, it's interesting because I mean, from the outside, people would say workaholic. From the outside, people would say ambitious, but I'm remarkably unambitious. I am just curious. So we were just talking before, I'm going on a holiday tomorrow, and I haven't been on a holiday literally for years. And I'm going to a place that I often go to off the coast of Lombok. in Indonesia. And part of the reason I'm going is that the island is so small, I know my way around it. So my own sense of adventure is curbed because I don't go, what's just above that? What's over that hill? What's around the bend?
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise I'd never be able to rest. And so I go there because I go, you just have to rest. So I think I am by nature really curious. And then how that is perceived or how that plays out is I know as soon as I get on the plane tomorrow, I'll go, oh, space. And then I'll start dreaming of an idea and I think, oh, I have to follow
Mm-hmm.
that idea. What could that
Mm-hmm.
be?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just there's
That's,
so many
yes,
things.
that would be me. I would lie there literally for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And then the next thing, my mind would be wandering onto the next great idea. I wrote a
Yeah.
whole marketing plan on an airplane once, thinking, oh, I'm just going to watch a movie. And I
Uh,
sat there for 5 minutes, and this whole thing just spewed through me. So I totally get it.
I
Totally.
understand. There was once, I mean, I think that the way that I remember that first understanding that was I was in a production of Oliver, Cameron McIntosh's production. It was beautiful, massive production. We toured everywhere. And I remember I thought one day I thought, you know what, this cast, the makeup of this cast, they'd be really good doing Into the Woods, Stephen Sondheim's Into the Woods. It just was something that occurred to me. And then I kept thinking, I'll just keep pushing the idea. And as long
Mm-hmm.
as it's not a no, it's a yes. So I'll just keep going. And then we ended up doing it as on stage at the Regent Theatre. And Cameron McIntosh gave us all this support, and it was for Equity Fights AIDS. And it was a wonderful thing to do that I was like, wow, just because I had that idea sitting over dinner that time, it just progressed to this huge thing. And so I've always been quite interested in, like, as they pass, what are the ones you catch and what are the ones you let go, and what are
Yes.
the ones that get their own life, and before you know it, you've got to drive them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sounds like you're a visionary too.
It's an interesting word because I've just recently been doing some workshops down in Launceston as part of the Australian Musical Theatre Festival's Makers Weekend. So it's a weekend just a bit for theatre makers. And we talked in the directing workshop I was taking about the idea of vision and what that is. And it's something, Marissa, that stopped me from being a director for a long time because people would talk about their vision and I thought it was supposed to occur in a particular way. And I thought, I don't have that, so therefore I'm not a director. It was only through like developing a process for me and how to direct that I went, oh, that's vision. I still feel a bit weird about the word. It sort of
Mm.
feels like
Mm-hmm.
it's reserved for the important people. And I go,
Mm-hmm.
oh no, I think we all have vision. Sometimes it's not as literal as I have a vision. Sometimes it is.
Yes.
Sometimes it's a process you have to go through. But I guess it always stopped me, and now I understand that I start with an idea, and the vision of that can be collaborative and can evolve over time.
Mm. And it's interesting that you've said it stopped you. However, it can also stop other people if your ideas are too big, if your ideas are overwhelming, if you're around people who don't have that curiosity, who don't have that ability to see into the future and to see what it is that you're wanting to put together. It's too grand. That can
Mm.
also be limiting, can't it?
You can, and I guess I mean, my passion had over the past sort of 10 years really has become process. My process as a director, what is that? I did my master's last year while we were in lockdown to try and understand that a little more. I teach to understand what the actor's process is, not just getting up and playing dress ups. I'm not very interested in that.
Mm.
So that idea of a vision, that is somewhere that something sparks, but then it's process that gets you there. And so just this morning, Marissa, we just did our presentation for I'm directing Tick Tick Boom at the Comedy Theatre in Melbourne, and then at QPAC next year.
Yes.
And we did our set presentation. And that's beautiful. That's evolved over the past month in a series of discussions, and now it's there. The vision is a three-dimensional set model. And so that's very exciting when you see it live
Mm-hmm.
out and keep developing and evolving.
Mm-hmm. So how do you feel personally when you see that, or when you have moments like that in your career, something that you've been able to visualize actually come together?
Honestly, and this is not the answer that, you potentially want to hear, mostly I'm dissatisfied, because the nature of directing, and that's what kind of I'm talking about in this, is a nature of, yes, collaboration, yes, building. That excitement you just heard in me about Tick Tick Boom
Hmm.
will ultimately go through a period of compromise now. We didn't quite get that finished to look the way we thought. It didn't quite, that. So a director's job is to hold on to that vision and then give up the things that they can't fight for anymore. And I feel the missing thing in my life as a practitioner is time.
Oh,
So it's the thing I long for more than anything. So I am doing musicals now. So if you think of musicals I've done this year, I did Anyone Can Whistle in a Day at the
oh my
Hayes Theatre,
gosh.
and a great Sondheim piece. It was delivered as part of the company. They do these staged readings, but I put it together in a day. So you can only ever give a moment of it. I mean, Barnum, which I did a few years ago with Todd McKenney, I had 3 weeks, but the equivalent production in London had 3 months. That
I
had
was going to say that's not
yeah,
very long.
yeah. Follies, which I did, had 2 weeks with Lisa McCune and Philip Quast and all these people. So I'm used to working quick and then having to discard what doesn't work and not having the true alchemy of time that come. I have it in my teaching. So that's the beautiful thing about working with people over 3 years, is that there is an exchange of ideas that evolves and grows. And even when I direct stuff here at the VCA, it might be like this year I directed elegies, William Finn's elegies, and the nature of the timetable is they're still doing other things. So I was only working 1 day a week for 8 weeks, and the breath in the piece, because of that, is really beautiful. Most of the commercial work is like, get it up as quick as you can. So I am often, and it doesn't, it's something I've got used to. I understand that the audience response is more important than mine in many
Mm,
ways, and as long as that they are
hmm.
enjoying, they can't see what's not there. But I
Of
always live with a
course.
little bit of like, oh, I just wish we could have. I only want, all of that.
Sounds like your career, especially as a director, is constantly figuring it out.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a
That,
puzzle.
yes,
It's
yeah.
a puzzle. And one of the things that freed me as a director was the notion that I didn't have to have the best idea in the room. I just had to edit the best idea. And so that was always for me. I was like,
Mm,
oh, thank God, because as an actor, I need a director.
mm,
Last year I did Next to Normal and I was in it and I needed Mark, the director. I needed him to be my director. And so I always, as an actor, then went, well, how am I going to be a director? Because that's the person I need, and I don't have that. It's a different perspective, of course, but it's something that, yeah, it's always a puzzle I'm trying to undo, and knowing that it is collaborative and that I can take the best idea from the 26 minds in the room rather than always have to come up with it
mm.
is part of the fun as well, the joy of
Yes.
it.
I think in any role that we play or any career path that we choose in the performing arts, that is what we do, though, isn't it? We have to figure things out. We're not
Hmm.
always given all the information, we're not always receiving all the training, we don't always have the luxury of time, we don't always have all the pieces of the puzzle. And I think to be successful, that's what we have to do, isn't it?
I
Constantly
also
figure
think
things out.
And I think we should, if you're going to be successful, it's finding enjoyment in that. I was
Mm,
recently on another podcast where I was talking about the work of Stephen Sondheim, and I don't know if you know, but Stephen Sondheim wrote these books of his lyrics, like about his work, called "Look, I Made a Hat" and "Finishing the Hat," and I never use them. In fact, I slightly resent that they exist, because I go, my job as a director is to unpuzzle the puzzle. So I don't want the cheat notes. I don't want to be let in to how to do it. That's my job. And that's really fun. And when I'm in that job, I learn something that I didn't know about myself. So
mm.
I'm always interested in sitting in the puzzle and sitting in the unknown for as long as we can and exploring. It relates to my previous thing about not enough time, because that's where the true discoveries get made beyond what you just think it should be. You start to
Yes.
intuit in a way. So that's really important, I think.
Yes. Have you ever had someone mentor you through any of this or inspire you along your journey of learning?
Not in the traditional way, like not in this particular. I mean, I have been handed from significant person to significant person in my life. And I certainly think that my own training at WAAPA was defined by a woman called Marcel Schmitz, who she was not in musical theatre, but she ended up teaching us. And so she had an approach to acting that was really refreshing and a very healthy kind of cynicism and kind of interest and about musicals and going, why would you do that? Why wouldn't you just do this? And she, you would have somebody, I'm sure, Marissa, we all have a teacher that unlocks something in us. And she was certain, I mean, she's with me every day. I mean, she's still around. She lives in Perth. And,
Mhm.
but I mean, there's not a day that goes by that I don't think of her. And then
Wow.
that has been, yeah. And I hear her in my speaking and I hear her,
Wow. That's
yeah.
incredible.
Yeah, oh yeah. And then for years afterwards, I mean, before I was a teacher, sometimes I would be led into team teach with her, would teach at different things. And before I was a director, I'd be interested in directing. And she was very close to Nick Enright, who is a great playwright, Australian playwright and
Mm.
filmmaker. Uh, and so I worked with him a bit and sort of it kind of got passed along. And then I think, quite significantly here at the VCA, it was Margot Fenley who was running the VCA when I arrived and had and still has a kind of magic in her teaching that is bigger than just we teach this at this point, then they get up and do that. And so I think I've been lucky. I've also been lucky because I was in lots of rooms with wonderful directors when I always wanted to work with John Bell, and I made sure that happened. I was like, I want to work at the Bell Shakespeare Company while John Bell is there, and I did. And I worked with, remarkable, people from Broadway that I would just watch and be really interested in. So I guess not I have no mentor. I think mentorship's really important, and I do have a kind of a wish list of trying to bring together directors and
Mhm.
artists to connect a little more. And I have those. There's a guy called Jason Langley who he's a wonderful director. I invite to all of my rehearsal room runs whenever I can and go, tell me what you think. And then I've
Wow,
been a
that's
mentor.
brave.
Well, he also knows where I am in the process. So he knows that he's not going to go, well, that doesn't work, or this doesn't. I mean, he's going to speak constructively and he's going to speak to a listening that we have. And I have a few people like that, Caroline Casper, Ilaria Rogers, people that I go, I want you to come and watch this. Um, and I think that's important and more important, to be honest. And I'll often say to Chris Parker or other directors, come and watch it. Tell me what you think, even after the show's opened, because I want to interrogate my work, and
Yes.
yeah, you know
Yeah,
what I
but
mean.
that's the only way we improve too, is we've got to keep pushing our boundaries. I mean, we can't put limitations on what we're capable of doing. We have to keep growing and evolving. Otherwise, that also kills our careers, but it also kills our creativity, doesn't it? And that
Absolutely.
inspiration to keep going. So all these people that you've had in your life that have come along and in some way had some input into your work, what's the greatest piece of advice you've been given by anybody? You had to think, okay, there's one thing.
Hey, this is almost a cliche. Like it's one of those
Yeah,
slightly gooey lines.
that's right. I
Oh.
can do goo.
But it's the thing, I guess, that I encourage in actors, in other, and I try and find other ways to say it. But at the end of the day, you want to say to an artist, "You're enough." That's what you want to say.
Mm,
That that you know
mm,
the race is long. It's only with yourself. That comparison is the, gateway to madness, or at least
Yes.
unhappiness. And that there is that what you create and what you want, like to not search outside too much, to know that you can present something. And it's what I wish I'd known as an actor earlier on,
Mm.
because sometimes I find, like, we've just done the VCA auditions, and some of the best actors we had are actors who have just come to acting really late. Because you find when you love it when you're young, it becomes this thing that's bigger than you. And so you're always in kind of servitude to this thing. Whereas it's just acting. You do your work, you do your process, and you bring yourself to it, and then you throw it up in the air and see what lands, and you work really hard, of course. But I sometimes think that the shining lights of it all get in the way or make you feel like there's something unreachable.
Hmm.
And yeah, you're enough, I think, is
Yeah,
important.
yeah, I love that. I love that. And with those students that are coming to you at that later age, they would be coming in too with a certain amount of maturity that they would be they would allow themselves to become more vulnerable or not, depending. I mean, as we get older, we can get in our heads more, or maybe not. What are you finding with these students?
Look, when I went to WAAPA, it was a different kind of training where we had people in my year who were in their 30s, we had people who were divorced, we had people who were straight out of school, 17 years old. Um, the industry has asked more and more for younger people. Um, and for a
Yes.
long time here at BCA, we sort of gave that. But something happens when you put together. I can't say that I can necessarily put my finger on what an older person brings or what this, but what I can
Hmm.
say is that when you're creating an ensemble and you have different lived experience, the experience of training inside of that is much richer. And so I'm always trying to cast, in inverted commas, the year groups at VCA like a company, like you'd cast a company with not, I don't choose the best 20 people to come to VCA. I choose the people that are most interesting together and will push each other and challenge and support. Underneath it all, support, but bring in different voices so that the training is robust and interesting and it is of them, not just the thing that we do every year.
Hmm. So they're not just learning from you, but they're learning from each other essentially.
Well, as I mean, the student, I mean, the nature of what we know about learning is it's so much about critical self-reflection and what they're discovering. I mean, that's so important to just get somebody up and direct them. That's not that's the icing.
Mm.
So critical self-reflection is huge for me. It's like, well, what do you think? I mean, if you've found a better way to do this, tell me and we'll work it out.
Yes,
And it's
yes,
engaging in a conversation,
yes.
definitely.
So that to me sounds like student-centered learning, which is
Yeah.
I 100% advocate for that because it's not about us, it's about them. So, what would you say is your teaching philosophy?
So interesting. It's a bit like when somebody says, "What's your vision as a director?" And I go, "Ah!" Somebody goes,
Good note.
"Thank you." I go, "What is your teaching philosophy?" I've been asked that like I was a teacher. Like the nature of all of us here is we're all practitioners who just went, "How do you teach this? What does this look like?" So I don't know if I have the kind of answer to that. That
Hmm.
I know that what it's about for me is, and a lot of this I learned from Margot Fenley, as I talked about previously, and also Marcel, is I know that it doesn't work if I prescribe how it should be done. I know that. I know I have to be specific in my criticism and very general in my warmth and support. Um, I know that students want specifics. They want something, they don't want frou-frou, they want to know and yet they also want a little bit of magic. They do want that because let's face it, there's a bit of magic that we love.
Hmm.
Um, so I think, the thing that I was saying before about you're enough, the work gains when they're not trying to impress me. It's very, very hard because I am my title is head of music theatre. there's a
Yes.
hierarchy that is literally in the
Hmm.
title. I'm the head
Yes.
of music theatre. And
But
for
sorry,
yeah.
you're also Tyran Parke.
Well, that's interesting because for all that it's worth, like there are a lot of benefits that my students get because I'm in the industry. So, they
100%.
yeah, a lot of my friends come to teach, and my friends happen to be fabulous directors and whatever and all that, which is
Hmm.
great. But where I find it tricky is if the students are trying to predetermine a path that involves getting a job from me, then they're not able to fail. And so we have to set up a kind of, this is our relationship in the studio. And when we leave, we go through a little rite of passage to go, and now I'm your friend, and now I'm your colleague. And now what does it
Yes.
look like now? But in the
Yes.
studio, I have to allow them, and unfortunately, people younger and younger are getting less interested in craft and more interested in being famous. So
Mm-hmm.
I could be
Mm-hmm.
perceived as a step towards that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I shut that down right away and go, I'm not interested in that. I'm not going to do that for you. I'm not even going to work with you because I have a bit of a thing about supporting my students with other directors, but not necessarily hiring them for the first few years out. Um, so and mainly that's just because I know them. I know them so well, and I go and be with
Yes.
other people, and
Yes. Yes.
Um,
Yes.
so I think I've it's one of the tricky things about my position is the shadow of it means that people can sometimes feel a little bit intimidated. I think that's hilarious, but I guess they're intimidated by the position and how they perceive that. And so it's my job
Mm-hmm.
first up in first year to get that out of the way and go, we jump into the muck, we all make mistakes. Let's, you know,
Mm-hmm.
let's
Mm-hmm.
jump in,
Yes.
and look forward.
So you're teaching them how to fail
That's the
better.
point.
Yes.
Yeah.
So how do you then create a safe space for them to be vulnerable and to explore what they can do and to be playful and know that it's okay to fail? Because that's hard.
Yeah, yeah, it is hard and it takes a while. And that's part of the reason the curriculum is set up the way it is we don't ask people to perform for a long time because that's the opposite of feeling, of allowing them to be vulnerable. Suddenly they go, oh my God, I'm going out there. I have to put on these things.
Mm-hmm.
So it takes conversation and it takes a level of trust and a level of play. So play is very important. That
Yes.
we realize that you fall over and you hurt your knees and you dust them off and you're okay. The same is true of creative play. So you hold a space where people realize that risk is celebrated. Um, and that takes time. That's not something I can do in um, a few weeks and then we move on to other things. Like first year really is about the individual student and them as a storyteller and what techniques they acquire and what gets in the way of their techniques to tell stories, whether it be singing, acting, and dancing.
Mm-hmm.
So that is very much about play-based exploration. And I need to jump into it too. And I need to show them that I make mistakes. I need to jump in. I need to be foolish. I need to go, oh gosh, that was awful. I was, or whatever it is, so that they go, oh wow. Sometimes people get really surprised. When I was casting Hairspray, people would come in and there'd be ex-VCA grads and they go, oh my gosh, it's just like at uni. It's just like, it's like, of course it is. That's just
Mm.
us playing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's very important.
Yes, yes. And the thing is that I like you, everything that you're saying is exactly the same way I go about teaching voice.
Well, that
I
doesn't
just,
surprise me because I look at you. You've got a kind of energy about that. I go, ever since I met you, I'm like, yes, that's the energy you give off. I can feel that.
well, I'm the same everywhere I go. Like whether I'm in the teaching studio, I've cried in the studio if someone sung something so beautifully. I'm not afraid to cry. I dance when I get into the rhythm. Like
Yeah.
and I've had notes that I've gone to hit and had a massive fail because I didn't take time to think about what I was doing. I just went blah. And so, I mean, yes, I've had those failures too. And I show my students that I'm vulnerable as well. And they go, oh, it's okay. It's okay to do all this. I know for me, though, I have to do a lot of checking in with my biases. I have to learn to be kind to myself. I have to learn to always I have to be authentic myself to allow my students to be authentic. Do you check in with yourself as well and with your biases and go, okay, I have to leave these at the door. If I'm having a bad day, that has to stay at the door. So you're checking in with how you are in that moment before you step foot into the studio.
Absolutely. Sometimes it's not as clean as the moment before because you're running around, you're really busy, and you're suddenly in there.
Mm-hmm.
But I will always, there are certain things I know that can be problematic. I have learned over time to be a very good listener, but I also know that sometimes the energy of teaching can have an element of performing. There's a kind of entertainment to it. There's
Oh,
a
yes.
group of people are going on this journey and they're looking up to me and I have to be, sometimes I just have to check. If I go, did you talk too much in that class, Tyron? I go, the fact that I have to ask myself means yes. I go, you did, you must have. And is there space? Did you give enough space for that moment, or did you jump in and try and save someone? Because sometimes in saving somebody, you stop them from making the discovery. And again, Marcel taught me that, not even in my teaching, just as a person. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, so I have to check those things. In terms of um, cultural biases, that's something that I check as much as I can. And then the student, I have to be comfortable with my own shame that the student is allowed to check me and go, I just want to bring that up. That I
Right.
just, because like I'm a white man. So we have a diverse cultural student cohort,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm the head of the department and of an institution that is inherently white.
Yes.
It's an
Yes.
institution, like
Yes.
and I'm I'm trying to learn in that same way that we talk about how do we allow them to learn. I need to try and give them permission to speak to the head and go, I just want to ask you about that. That feels potentially offensive to me. That feels, and to be able to sit in that and go, tell me about that. What is the impact of that? What can I not see? What did I just, and to, clean it up.
Yes.
That is
Yes.
that's new. That's new because young people are more empowered because they've been socialized differently because the generation of post Me Too, post the resurgence of Black Lives Matters, post pandemic, climate change, the concerns and the requirement for them to be outspoken is the planet. So they
Mm-hmm.
better be outspoken because they've got something to fight for, and they've got
Yes.
many things to fight for, and so I have to sit in the world of allowing and engaging and encouraging that and still teaching and maintaining a class. And sometimes I will take it all on and go, I still think this is the way to go. I think this is right, because sometimes I
Mm.
still am the head and I'm still being paid to be the head of department. So it's a tricky space sometimes for teachers in the
Mm.
current navigation of
Mm.
students, young people with varying degrees of mental health challenges. All those things are present. And before, when you said you have to check things at the door, yes and no. We were always told, leave everything at the door, suck it up, you're on. And more I go, bring it in, see what happens. If it's safe, if you're
Mm.
safe, um,
Mm.
if you, because sometimes the energy of not bringing it in and going, I don't really feel this way, is what gives people panic attacks. And I go, in the space of a comfortable space where it's about exploration, if you're safe, so I have a thing with the students, if you are at risk to yourself and others, you don't come to class, whatever that risk is. It can be
Mm-hmm.
mental health, it can be anything. um, but if you are just struggling, because I think there's a difference with students, sometimes students go, I feel unsafe, and you go, do you feel unsafe or do you feel uncomfortable? Because uncomfortable is the requirement of our job, and we have to
Yes.
get used to that. We have to get used to that, what that feels like, and not try to
Mm.
wriggle out of it. And so sometimes I think it's useful for students, particularly, to just maybe let some of that be in the space. I don't need to know about it. If they, as long as they feel that they can handle it. I'm not a fan at all of people using trauma in their work. I don't agree with that. But sometimes the energy that's required to leave it at the door is like, maybe you can just release it a bit and see what happens.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
And yeah, and sometimes I know if you can do it through your craft, if you have a student who's maybe going through something, releasing it through the appropriate song that they can vent or they can release that emotion.
Well, it's so funny because I'll often teach. I'll teach a bunch of actors, and then I'll teach a bunch of music theatre people the same class. And music theatre people are generally happier because they just sort of they make the noise that just like gets stuff off their chest, They just do.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
do you find that when you're in that teaching mode, that there's a conflict between Tyran the director and Tyran the teacher?
No, I don't. I'm pretty clear. I'm pretty clear with my students. I go, this is technical and this is taste. I'm not interested in directing you in the piece. I'm interested in your ideas and what you think the piece is about.
Right.
But I'm certainly interested in serving the writer. So some of that will be there because I'll go, as a director, I'd do this. And I go, well, that's important actually, because that's how you serve the writer, which is our job. So that needs to be expressed. Um, so, but I am pretty clear with the students when I am giving them directorial suggestions and when I am giving them technical adjustments.
So they know the difference, which is
Yeah.
fantastic. So, in terms of this is the last question I'll ask about the teaching industry because I'm keen to get on to the other stuff. But in terms of higher education and the status of programs at the moment, do you think that students are being given the right training for the industry? Because I mean, you're sitting on those audition panels. Do you feel that their needs are being served and the industry's needs are being served when you see this fresh lot of graduates coming through?
Yeah, that's my job. And that's part of the joy of being on panels. I mean, the reason I came to VCA was there's this extraordinary artist called Jenny Little, and I worked with her a lot. And I thought, who is she? She's so well trained. And then I started to cast a lot of VCA grads, and I thought, what are they doing there?
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to try and find out. And now, if I just look at this year, sitting on the audition panels for Hairspray, for instance, or Tick Tick Boom, or any number of things I do, I look at the gaps or I look at the culture that VCA has and then how that translates into the room. And then I go and reverse engineer. It's the same with the teaching. I do the showcase at the end of every year. And through the showcase, I go, wow, we need to lean more heavily into this element, and then I go back and make
Yes.
sure that that's there. So it's the gift of being at both ends, you know.
Yeah.
And so when you say, do you feel like it serves the industry? I certainly hope so because I've taken that on as the dual role in my life feeds the other.
Mm. Because I know in my field, I teach in CCM, which is
Yep.
contemporary commercial music styles outside of classical music, that higher education institutions aren't meeting the demands of what students want at present. And it's been a big fight. So I'm glad to see that music theatre institutions then have pulled their socks up and they're working with the industry to make their students industry ready and employable. So yeah, sorry, you're
Yeah, I
going.
was going to say is look, that's the idea, and each year, we just had the graduates this year do their showcase in Sydney and Melbourne, and then they all got agents, and that is the measure of success is going. What happens beyond that, I don't know.
Mm,
We've just handed them to the next person who then opens the window to the next thing, and they walk through that in whatever way they want to,
mhm.
and it's strangely sort of none of my business. Like I'm happy for them whether they become florists or whatever they do. Um, so I
As
really
long as they're
genuinely am.
happy.
Yeah, I really am.
That's
But
it.
my job is to get them an agent that then gets them in the door, that gets them, and to just, for them to what I try and do at VCA is create a world and a culture so that the industry is not very different from what they've had here. They just
Mhm.
move through it. And by the time they get to third year, they're like, oh, I see, this is the industry. And then they're in the industry. They go, oh, great, we're just doing the thing we've always done, which is great.
That's just a natural progression, it sounds like. It's just like this is where we go. We're just going from one room to another. We're
That's sort of what
still
you
in
hope, because if you think of like first year is all about the individual and like sometimes the individual in an ensemble, but about literally your instrument, your body, your voice, your spirit, and storytelling. The second year is about character and style and adjustments and text, and the third year is about performance and industry. So by the time you've got to the end of third year, you're like, oh, it just seems obvious now that we go into audition rooms.
yeah, yeah. I want to move along into the auditioning process, and this is you sitting on the audition panel. And I heard the other day, it was someone on TV was saying, and I had to write it down because I knew I was interviewing you. And it was something that Al Pacino had once said. And it
Mhm.
was, it's not the best actor that gets the role, it's the one who is best at auditioning. And
Mhm.
I thought this makes so much sense. And I
Mhm.
actually used to say this to my students because how often do you go and see a music theatre production? Let's just say we'll keep it within that realm. And you see someone who's not the strongest dancer, and you know so many other dancers who are way stronger than them, or you know someone who's a brilliant singer but never gets employed.
Yeah.
So, what is it that you're looking for? What is the number one mistake that people are making, these highly talented people? Where are they missing out?
Look, I think the biggest thing that stops people from doing well in auditions, myself included, is preparation. And then it's about being present. So, you can't be present if you haven't done like tons of preparation to be truly present, to be present so that you can play, so that people go, they had that extra thing, they had the extra, sure. They had the extra thing because they knew it so well that they could be in the world of the play with you in a bad audition room. They could just
Mhm.
enter it and go, great, this is what I was thinking. Is this what you were thinking? Now, you can't do that if part of your job is while you're doing it is, lift that soft palate or careful of that tension, or
Yes, yes. The
what are the words
technique,
coming up?
yeah,
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 all that
technique
stuff.
gets in the way. It has to be in your body so well, and it has to be like muscle memory that you can then do whatever you want to in the moment and feel given honest performance of it.
It's the reason why in the old days people used to have, two or three songs, and they'd come in and that those were the songs they auditioned with really well. Now that's not, there's the range of music theatre, the demands of the style, vocally, musically, it's so different that you can't do that. And also now you have to pretty much learn the whole role just to go and present that at the audition. So it's a different thing about how you prepare, and it sounds so simplistic, but it's massive
Hmm.
having that preparation so that you can then treat that as the lift off and throw all the homework away. So that is all in your backspace. That is done, and you're present with the person. That is what makes a great audition, the playfulness. And also, of course, knowing that it's not just about the role, it's about, do I want to spend the next, 3 weeks in a room with this person? And kind of come up with this thing together. So there's a generosity of spirit. None of that can happen if you are struggling to remember the words.
Mm. And do you have an expectation that they know the backstory about the character of the song that they're
Um,
singing, or
look,
the
I have my own,
musical?
yeah, look, I have my own private thing about, I wish you knew more, but that's the old man in me. People are not very interested in that these days. My main thing is I will know more and I will prepare that. I just need you to be brave. And if I have to lead you to the text a little bit, what does it do for you? How do
Hmm.
you respond to it?
Hmm.
So it's not that, of course, if you're going to do a piece from Hamilton or Cinderella or whatever, you're doing a piece out of somebody's life. You're saying this person lived, they've had a whole life that led to this moment. Of course, all of that stuff matters. And if it doesn't, if you just walk in and sing it brilliantly, great. Excuse me. What I want to know is like, I can bring that stuff for you. What are you going to do with the information? Because I need
Hmm.
to see it then embodied very quickly in the space.
Do you ever have someone in front of you where they sing something nicely and you think, oh yeah, like, but I really want them to do this, or maybe let's see how much I can direct this person, and then you start giving them directions and you
Oh God,
see how
all the
they,
time.
yeah.
All the time. Oh, producers hate it because they're like, can we just move on? And I'm like, hang on, that person can do better. I can, I think,
Hmm.
being so actor centric, I, I, I've been on many panels where the musical director would go, oh, I don't think so. No, I don't think that voice can blend. And I'll go, well, let's ask. Let's ask them to sing it again and see if they can blend. And if you ask an actor to do something, they will tie themselves in a knot to do it. They will, but I find too often in this country, it's like, no, they can't do this. And I go, well, let's ask them. I don't think they can do it. Well, we'll ask them. I've had many, when I did chess last year, there was somebody who was in that cast who kept getting cut. And the musical director would say, no, I just think that their twang is too bright. I go, give me a sec. And I'd run outside and I'd go, excuse me, can you come back? The twang's a bit bright. Can you come and sing it again? They'd solve it. They would solve it. Actors are amazing. What's
Yeah.
tricky is when they don't get invited into the conversation, and you can't do it with everyone. But I'm frequently, and because I'm interested in working with creative, imaginative people, I will always get up and work with people. I usually read at my own auditions, so I'm the reader as well. So I go, let's do a
Hmm.
scene, and it's important for me in a way more than what they prepared to know what they're going to do when they're engaged with another person on stage.
Yes, exactly. Now, I have a bit of a peeve,
Mm-hmm.
and that is when I go to musical theatre shows, I find that there seems to be, and this is just my opinion, just putting it out there. I
Seems
haven't
like you're putting a
seen.
lot of like preamble here, like just be
Okay,
careful.
okay. I find that there seems to be at times like a stereotype
Yep.
in terms of physicality, age, that kind of thing.
Yep.
And when it comes to singing, a lot of the singers all sound the same. There seems to be this generic musical theatre twangy sound
Oh my
that
God, yes.
drives me insane. And I want to know, like, what is it, like an assembly line of singers? Like, I'm
Isn't it
not,
all?
it's, can I, it's bloody terrible and it messes with my head.
Do you want me to tell you a little story about my response to that?
Yeah, I'd
I
love to hear it.
I'm very good friends with a fabulous singer called Natalie Gamsu. She's South African Jewish woman, lived all over the world, and has a very particular voice, very deep voice. She's
Mhm.
done everything from like Disney to, you know, you know, Greek tragedy. And recently there was, oh, it might have been a while ago. I think it was uh, a particular anniversary of Fiddler on the Roof, and there was a woman who does kind of impersonations. I can't think of her name. People listening will know. And she did a version of Tradition, and she said, "Wouldn't it be great?" She sort of did this thing where she went, "I'm going to sing each part of Tradition by a different singer: Judy Garland, Liza
Mhm.
Minnelli, Bernadette
Mhm.
Peters, Carol
Mhm.
Channing, Angela
Mhm.
Lansbury."
Mhm.
Blah blah blah. Julie Andrews, Barbara Cook, da da da. And you
Right.
went, and then you, and then I, and it was we were talking about it, and Nat said, if they did it today, they'd all sound the same
They would.
because
They
the
do.
character is no longer in the voice, and I blame the Mega Musical for that because what happened is once upon a time it was Carol Channing in Hello Dolly or Ethel Merman in Gypsy or da da da, and when Cam Mack brought out those big Les Mis, Miss Saigon, da da da, da all those things, the show was the star, and he was very clear about that. The show was going to live on for Cats now and forever. The show is the logo, the show, and you had to sing that way to be in the show. They weren't interested in character voices, like voices that had character. They were interested in when Michael Ball played Marius. Everyone after that, for the last 30 years, has tried to sound like Michael Ball.
Mm.
Has, and that's what they're not interested in your own version of that's the nature of that kind of theatre is they're not interested in your response to it. They're
Mhm.
interested in repeating and maintaining what Michael Ball did. And I think that has really meant that there's become a musical theatre sound that people emulate or try to, and I go, oh, sing with your
Thank
voice, like
you.
your own voice.
Thank
So
you.
much more interesting.
Yes, because as a singing teacher, I say, well, if you're trying to sound like someone else, then you're manipulating your instrument. And
Mhm.
therefore, how is that sustainable for X number of shows a week?
And just like, how is it interesting? Because I've
It's
got
so
that
not.
past recording of Michael Ball singing it, and it's great. But I don't need to go to the theatre if you're just going to sound like him. I
Mm,
want to know what you bring. You know
mm,
what you bring to this. I mean, the Michael Ball thing is just an example, but you know what I
mm.
mean.
Yeah, and on in terms of sustainability, I know the shows are becoming more and more demanding physically
Mm.
and
Mhm.
vocally. You know what they're asking singers to belt and
Yeah,
to be able to
yeah.
sustain, and the number of songs in all the shows is ridiculous. Are these artists now being taken care of by production companies? Is there a team around them? Like, do they have speech paths? Do they have singing teachers? Do they have physiotherapists? How are these people being taken care of that are expected to keep going and going and going?
Hmm. That's very interesting. Look, I think people have, again, post-pandemic, started to understand the toll on performers. The Arts Wellbeing Collective here in Melbourne um, was created because of that survey that revealed the very, very alarming mental health challenges in the industry.
Yes.
I think the thing about, like, I know that this is where it all becomes, oh my gosh, we could talk for days about the 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 economy of theatre. So, you know, what it once used to cost to put on a show, what it costs now, and how you have to be that Energizer bunny, that machine, and how even shows like Hamilton, they're not really written to do 8 shows a week, or the demands are so massive. Now, of course, we've seen things like, we know that all the Elphabas have had vocal damage and in Wicked, and
Mm,
we know, and we also know that you can do something on an album that then somebody has to then repeat, you know, each night in the, you know, forever on. You know, you go, oh my
yes.
god. Um, I think a lot of that is really left to the performer to try and navigate, and I think it's quite difficult. And I often don't think people know when they're creating the shows what the effect is going to be long term, because you can do it in a workshop and you can do it in rehearsals, but it's, you know, you're a singing teacher, it's the you get tired, or you hit that time when you're sick and you've got to go on and you don't have the recovery time, and then you're always chasing your tail, but you
Mm,
never get the recovery time again.
mhm,
So
mhm.
I think it's problematic. I also think there's a problematic value of belting high. So I find it tricky with my own students. They have that American Idol thing of like, where, what, you know, like, I'm all about story, and we're watching a student sing and suddenly they hit a note and they clap, and I go, whoa, 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 whoa. Like when we're in a Shakespeare scene and somebody has a, you know, we don't clap at the big emotional moment. Like, we go, what? Like,
No.
I feel like that's a cultural, you know, American Idol thing where we scream at the big note. And I think that's really problematic, because we're valuing kind of the vocal gymnast above the story. I mean, we all love it when they belt high and there's a reason and they're going for the story, but it doesn't make us burst into applause. Like,
Yes.
it's
That's like
weird.
turning the chair on The Voice.
Right, right. That's right. Yeah.
That's why I don't watch The Voice. It's the people that
Mhm.
can yell the loudest are the ones that they
Yeah.
turn the chair for. And I don't think it's very good that they're encouraging that kind of thinking. But
It's really interesting. I mean,
mm,
when we cast Tick Tick Boom, you know, it's a Jonathan Larson rock musical, and the musical director Cohen, he was very clear. I'm not interested in just like the big loud notes. He went, I want a voice that is sustainable through the range, that sounds like the one voice. The people that we cast are not those people who come out and just go, "Ah," like
Yeah.
it's a different kind of
Yes.
sound. And yeah.
Yes. Yes. So, with the world of change at present in terms of equity, diversity, inclusivity, and belonging, how do you handle all the politics and all that political correctness now within the music industry?
Um, I'm not sure in terms of how to answer how I handle it. I think I just have to, as I said, I'm an
Or,
old
sorry,
dude.
we can make it more general, like how do production companies deal with all this? Because it's changing all the time, and it's almost like we have to be educated on a regular basis to keep up with it all.
Yeah, and I think you trying to save me then and go, we could make it, it's actually easier to make it more specific. But I guess what I'm thinking about in terms of that, Marissa, is um, when I say like I'm an old white dude, it's it's my time to listen now.
Mm,
Um, it, old white dudes have held the space of these conversations for a long time. So it's my job to listen, and as you say, it's changing all the time. It's
mm,
really, so I know singing teachers who really feel it, particularly because singing teachers are often the ones that are in a room in their studios. Them is isolated. They don't necessarily work with colleagues that are coming in and feeding ideas and having a space to reflect.
yes.
um yeah, so I think I am blessed and cursed with the fact that I work with young people who it, it's like it's part of, we can't step into the studio without having those discussions, because it's between us and the work otherwise. So it is about um, trying to stay up to date and trying to research and trying to understand and then listening to the young people, and a bit like what I said before, knowing sometimes it's okay to push back, but to go only after I go, what is the impact here, what can I learn?
Mm,
um, my thesis was about reviving musicals in Australia at a commercial level and working to ensure that you're not reviving the social aspects of the time that are homophobic, racist, or misogynistic. Hard thing to do, particularly if you've grown up with a nostalgia about musical theatre. So, I had to do a thesis in order to go, this is I tell students that I'm going to stand for something, I'm going to have to do a bit of work around that just to understand, because it's not my lived experience. So I need to listen quite a lot.
mm. Have Okay, you call yourself a white old dude, which cracks me up because because you're certainly not old.
Thank you.
But have you ever in your career, though, even as a white guy, have
Yeah.
you ever been silenced or you felt that you haven't been heard in the industry? Someone tried to quieten you down.
What a great question.
You
Not
know,
in the same way, not in the
yeah.
same way that I'm thinking about now.
No, 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 no.
I
Just in a
yeah,
general way, have you ever felt like someone's not listening to me here? I'm trying to tell them something. I'm not being heard. I'm being silenced in this moment.
absolutely, absolutely. And there is something about um, my inherent respect for people that I don't think it's a bad thing, and my respect for people in the industry and my elders, if you like, and all of that, that wasn't necessarily a bad thing around that. Now, if I'm if I'm not being heard or if I'm being silenced, I try to consider what is problematic in my communication. So I try to go, how can I? What is here that I can't understand? For somebody to receiving me in that way, what what is going on with me? What can I learn here? And it's not always easy, of course,
Mm,
it's hard. And I've got an ego. Like nobody has a theatre company and a festival and a department and a career in directing and doesn't have an ego,
mm,
like
mm,
so it's a balance in a way, and it's a struggle that is made clearer through research, whether that be formal research or just listening. and also a trust in oneself that you will clean up any mess. So I will be able to communicate my way through whatever I mess up and sit in the uncomfortableness of that to ultimately learn from it. I think that where I have to step in most with teachers that work here at the VCA are people who are too scared now to really engage in the work because they're worried that they might get cancelled at the highest level. Or
Really?
yeah, a bit, yeah. Um, or people who, and they wouldn't, it's not, that's the most exaggerated level. Or they're nervous about students, about putting a foot wrong. And I go, we're telling them, put a foot wrong, fail. We're this going full circle for our
Mm,
conversation here in
mm.
studio. We're going,
Yes,
fail, you're allowed to
yes.
fail. Them seeing me fail and me going, I'm so sorry, I don't understand. What do I have to do? Sometimes I will ask you to teach me, but I also understand that sometimes our people of color are tired of teaching me. And I go, absolutely, just point me towards somewhere or I'll go and find it, you know? So, I mean, that's a very complex um, uh, system that we're talking about in a way. But I think,
Absolutely.
yeah, I think where it comes from mostly is also where, if you're a teacher, years ago, I remember seeing dance teachers particularly. Students would go, "What does that mean?" And they'd go, "Oh, you've just got to get the internal gravitas of the music that goes, bada whoom pa." And the student go, "Okay, great." And then they'd sing and go, "Much better." And you go, "That doesn't even make any sense. Like, what are we talking about here?"
What
I
is
think we're
that?
I think we've got to be brave enough to sit in unknowns with each other. And we
Mm.
talked before about vulnerability. If we can't be vulnerable as teachers, if we're just trying to pass on the knowledge is outdated now anyway. A lot of it is useful, but we have to be constantly redefining our approach into it and our doorways that we're opening into it, or it's gonna be outdated.
Yeah.
We're the
And
wrong side.
yeah, yeah. We talked about political correctness and we're still talking about that. But I remember at a conference that you were presenting at a couple of months ago where we reconnected, you talked about intimacy, coordination, and there are sensitivity readers
Mhm,
for
mhm,
productions. So
mhm.
what are these roles and how do you make decisions around what is appropriate or not within a music theatre production? And
Great.
can you make changes to a show because now we don't refer to a person that way or women are not treated like that these days?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's sort of two responses there. The first one, which is the very practical response of why do we have sensitivity readers and like the industry has changed, and it's changed because there were quite a large group of people who were feeling the negative impact of not really being heard. And when I think back to my year group at WAAPA, there were a lot of struggles that were happening behind closed doors there. And the impact wasn't great. This was a long time ago, and it was not. You weren't encouraged to eat well. It was just be skinny,
Yeah,
blah blah
yeah.
blah.
That's the
You know,
ballet
and
world still
that's
to a
about it.
certain
Yeah,
degree.
yeah. And so there was also that culturally, there was that in terms of misogyny, homophobia, and music theatre has been written largely with a white focus and by men in worlds that they haven't known their unconscious bias. They can't. Shakespeare didn't know his bias. How could he? He was
Mm,
in the world.
hmm.
So, and we have sensitivity readers so that they read the play from a perspective outside of mine. So they will not be white people. They will not be men. If it's a show I'm directing, it'll be somebody who reflects something that I didn't know, I didn't see. One of the examples that I often give is when I was directing chess. I grew up with chess, so I didn't question a particular lyric until I had a non-binary student cast member in the show who said to me, "Look, this is offensive," and I was like, "Oh, is that what that means? Oh my god!" So my own
Wow.
bias didn't hear it, and my nostalgia in a way. And so we have set things set up. So like sensitivity readers to go, as a director, you need to be aware of this and the impact of that. What are you going to do about it? Intimacy coordinators is something else. That's for people who are, we have to use our bodies in ways in the theatre. and in intimate ways. And we have fight choreographers. This is so that it keeps people safe, so there are boundaries, so it's repeatable, just like choreography. Um, and my experience of intimacy coordinators is that they liberate the work. I do things way more graphically than I would if it was just me fumbling, going, is that okay if you just like touch there? Is that kind of, there's a language and a process, and everybody understands that. Um, and then in terms of the second part of the question, which is what do you do when you have a piece that's problematic, which is, I have to say, most pieces in musical theatre, you've got a few choices. You can be creative about the response in terms of where you set it. I have to be really clear also, there's nothing wrong with seeing misogyny or homophobia or racism on stage. There's nothing wrong with seeing that, provided there's consequence to it or irony in it, provided that
Right.
it's, yeah, it's not like we're trying to go, this never happens. That would be awful. Our theatre would be so boring, and never, we go, that doesn't reflect life. But what we're saying is that the writer doesn't believe in this. There's a consequence to this, or there's irony, or there's a way that it's set up. So as a director, you have to look at all the ways that you can make it work. That could be through costuming, through props, through delivery of lines, through particular, and I could talk about this forever, but I won't. All of that, there's a creative response, and then if you really can't, there's a letter to the estate people, the authors. And in my own career, they've always been very open to that, because they are largely white men who go, "What are you seeing that I don't? How really is that? Oh, okay?" And they don't want it to be offensive. They just don't know. Like if I said to Shakespeare, can we talk about Taming of the Shrew? I'm sure he'd go, but I didn't mean that. You go, okay, where it sits now, this is what it looks like. Can I possibly blah 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 blah? So I think everyone is engaged in the act of listening to a piece of theatre in the context of today, which has changed very much in the last 5 years. And I think that's part of our responsibility and our skill set. And I think sometimes you can't change it. And in those instances, you maybe should consider whether you're the right person to direct it.
Wow, that's a lot.
I
That is
know, sorry,
a
that was
lot.
quite a big
No,
question. I was like, oh my
no, I know. No, no, no. I'm
God.
thinking that's a lot of work for a director. That's a lot to consider. But hey, you know what? You're educating the people who wrote the pieces too. That's incredible. You
Well,
are,
it
in
is
a
more work.
sense, doing that.
It is more work. It's part of the thing that changed. Is directors can't just waltz in and go, "Okay, darlings, I'm in charge. Come over there, stand there, put your arm up." That you go, you can't do that, and it's part of what has shifted in the community theatre world. Is that community theatre has often had a value which is like just doing the professional production on a smaller stage, but they,
Yes.
do that because they'll find they're finding they're falling into unconscious going issues of going, oh, we didn't mean that, but they did it in this. And they go, yeah, they did that, but that was 15 years ago, and the world changed. I
It
think
has
it's time to do that.
changed
So yeah,
so
keeping on top of
much.
that is part of the job, I'm afraid.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, there's so many questions I want to keep
So
asking you.
many.
So many, because I mean, then you have to consider audiences and how they're going to react to seeing theatre as it was 15 years ago, but now when they see it in the new context, how do they react to that? Are they grateful for that, or do they enjoy that, or do audiences walk out because it's changed?
Yeah, and I think for me personally, my thesis was on very specifically commercial music theatre in Australia, which has a very specific outcome, which is money, right?
Mm,
And popularity. That's what
mm,
it's after. So
mm.
we're not, you can go to the Hayes, or you can go to kind of an independent theatre company, and you can make these extraordinary, interesting new ways of doing it, and people will accept it for where it is. What I find really tricky is, you want to do that thing, and it's been done before. Bart Sher in My Fair Lady, Hal Prince in Cabaret, where they're singing about one thing, but there's something else going on. So on one level, people are enjoying it, but also what we're saying can land in a particular way. And I don't think anyone misses the old version of My Fair Lady when they see it, because it's not radically different. They're not in like punk uniforms, or they still look like, it still looks like My Fair Lady. It's just at the end, has more agency for the lead female character. And, some people might go, oh, how, fancy doing that to theatre. And I go, yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on depends what you think theatre is for.
Yes.
So we each come to that with our own thing. Understanding the impact on minority groups has been part of my life, particularly since being here at VCA. And so therefore it's the responsibility of my work.
Hmm. We're going to start wrapping this up because we could talk forever.
No, we
So
really
many
can.
things.
And
So
we got
many.
really deep there. I thought we were just going to laugh and chat for a whole bunch, like it's like, oh
I
my God,
know.
here's a
Sorry.
rabbit hole.
Sorry. Well, yeah, we can laugh. We can laugh, but and I was just so interested in what you were saying that I got suckered into the conversation, and I was hungry for wanting to learn more about what you were saying. So, advice you would like to give to teachers that are working in the music theatre industry? Do you have anything you would like to offer them?
Um, Keep your own curiosity and don't pretend to know everything. If you pretend to know everything, just don't show up. Like, come in with an inquiry and engage everybody else in how might we do this.
Love it. And what about advice for emerging artists, people who want to get into the performing arts industry, music
Um,
theatre specifically?
hmm. Look, what I try and encourage in the people I work with is, yes, you have to sing, yes, you have to dance, yes, you have to act, but that will only take you so far, because what will happen is you'll get really good at that, and before you know it, you'll be in a show, and then you'll realize the show is not your life, and it will feel empty. So add to that a monstrous hunger for storytelling, and you'll always be evolving and rich and engaged and soaking the marrow out of what you've done, even if it's what some people might consider to be escapism.
Wow,
That thunder.
that is thunder. Sorry,
Oh my
could you?
God, that was like the gods going, like
I know.
right when I finished.
That was so dramatic. We couldn't have written that into a show.
I reckon you've been sitting there on the sound effect button going, ready to go, bam, go.
Yeah, I know. Some people I would like to go bam, go. No, no, no. I love all my no, no. I love all my guests. I promise. I promise. And what about legacy for you? You've done all these incredible things and you continue to do all these incredible things. What would you like to be remembered for?
The festival. And that's a weird thing. You go, that's very specific, Tyran. I mean, you have your own company, you have your own, but the festival is the Australian Musical Theatre Festival in Launceston each May is the thing that I believe theatre to be about. And it is about community and storytelling. And yes, it's about musical theatre, but it's framed in a way that people find something in themselves that is very unique, and in the end of the day is much bigger than musical theatre, because it's about empathy and communication and understanding and character and seeing things from various points of view. That it's yes, it's the festival, but the festival is, I'm in such a fortunate position where I have a series of events that speak to each other, and through the art form that I love, in a way that is bigger than the art form that I love.
That is brilliant.
Thunder. Where's the thunder clap for that? Thank you.
I just gave you a clap, but it's not thunderclap. Sorry, it's nowhere near as dramatic. I
God,
can't
I can get so
thunderclap
earnest.
on. I can't thunderclap on cue.
Believe me, everyone, I'm not usually this earnest. She's just asking all the really big questions. I'm like, oh my God.
Sorry, Tyran.
No, I love it. I love it. It's
That's
great. Get
good.
into it.
Yes. And what are you up to next?
The very next thing I do is go and collapse on an island, which is fantastic.
Yes.
Then come back and do a lot of setting up for next year for VCA. And then I go straight into the Tick Tick Boom, which is the musical about Jonathan Larson, the guy who wrote Rent. 5 people, fabulous band, fabulous team. And now, as of today, a set, which is lovely. And that will tour. And then I start, then I'm back into VCA, which was always a new lease of life at the start of the year about kind of, right, what do we want to achieve? So Looking forward to it.
Amazing. Well, we're going to share links to where people can find you, your work, anything you want to share so people can find out more and follow your next, because there's always a next with you. But thank you
And
so much.
you,
I
you are
know.
so busy,
we-
constant.
I know we're both busy. We're both curious. And we
Indeed.
we always have to have a next. Even
Indeed.
when we're sitting on an island, there's still got
Exactly.
to be a next. But
Here's
thank
the
you.
next.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for being on the show and good luck with everything and enjoy your island.
Thank you so much. I shall. I can't wait to see you in person again soon. Thank you for
I
having me
know,
on.
air hug.
Yeah, indeed. Thank
Okay.
you, Clarissa.
See you. Bye.
Bye.